name's Ellis. I'm 32, and I do maintenance for the school district out near Draffin's Fold, right where the Varnick spine starts folding into real backcountry. I grew up around these woods. My father taught me how to track things, deer, raccoon, even the occasional fox. My mother, she taught me how not to get lost, which was maybe more important. And Bran, my best friend since 5th grade, taught me how to laugh off the kind of weird that doesn't have a name. Bran and I had been hiking these hills for close to 15 years. Nothing extreme, nothing that'd get us in a documentary. Just local trails, overnight packs, sometimes a little flask of cheap whiskey to chase off the cold. We liked the quiet, the kind that settles in your chest and makes you forget the world screaming outside of the trees. Last fall, Bran showed up at my place with this old map he found in his granddad's shed. Said it was wedged behind a toolbox in a cracked leather folder. It looked handmade, creases worn soft, edges browned and brittle like leaf paper. There were a few notes scribbled on it, names of trails we already knew, some old logging paths, and then a ridge on the far edge, circled in thick, jittery pencil. No trail name. Just a note, keep away. No good. I asked if he was serious about it. He shrugged, that crooked grin on his face, and said, only one way to find out. We set out the next weekend. It was a short hike distance-wise, maybe 3 or 4 miles off the main trail, but the terrain slowed us down. The path was barely a whisper, and the closer we got to the ridge, the more the woods seemed to lean in. We made it just before dusk. The ridge wasn't tall, more of a steep rise than a mountain, but it felt off. I don't know how else to say it. The air felt heavier, like it was pushing down. Bran stopped joking a few minutes in. He kept glancing around like he was waiting for something to leap out. I cracked a joke about him losing his edge, but he didn't laugh. We set up camp anyway. The fire wouldn't catch right, even with dry wood and kindling. We hovered close to it, chilled deeper than the temperature should have allowed. I remember noting how quiet it was, not peaceful but void-like. Like someone had turned the sound off. Not even a leaf crunching in the wind. Around midnight, I heard it, movement. Slow, deliberate steps. Not stomping, not sneaking. Just big and intentional. I froze. Bran sat up like he'd been waiting for it, knife already in hand. I had my flashlight, but I didn't turn it on. Not yet. I wasn't ready to see what was out there. The steps stopped at the edge of the light. Then came the breathing. Fast, erratic, like something pretending it knew how to breathe but hadn't quite figured it out. It didn't sound like a bear or any animal I knew. It sounded wrong, like a dog trying to imitate a person. Bran stood, squared his shoulders, blade forward. Then it rushed us. I didn't see it clearly. It moved weird, like it wasn't all the way there. Like someone had drawn it wrong and tried to fix it mid-run. Bran didn't hesitate. He charged it, slashing like he'd done this before. There was a scream, high, sharp, too shrill to be anything natural. My ears went numb. The thing recoiled and vanished into the trees like it was never there. Bran hit the ground hard. His chest was torn open, shirt shredded, skin peeled back in gashes too deep for any wild animal. I scrambled for the first aid kit, hands shaking so bad I could hardly open the latches. I wrapped him up as best I could and prayed nothing vital was hit. We didn't sleep. We left before sunrise, half carrying, half dragging him down the slope. I kept checking over my shoulder, expecting to see that thing creeping behind us. The woods stayed quiet, too quiet. We didn't stop until we hit the road. Bran spent 3 weeks in the hospital. The doctors said it was probably a bear or a cougar, but the claw marks didn't match. Too uneven, too deep, too human. Like a hand with too many fingers. He didn't argue with them, just nodded and stared at the wall. 2 months later, he moved to Craythorne Ridge in Colorado. Took a job fixing HVACs. Said the dry air helped him breathe. Me? I still hike. Still love the woods. But I stick to marked trails now. Trails with names, maps, and people who've walked them before and come back. I don't go near that ridge anymore. I don't need to. I've got nothing to prove. If you're reading this and you've seen something similar, I'd love to hear it. Drop a comment. And if there's a place you've heard stories about, places marked keep away, let me know. Maybe someone else needs to hear it too. But take it from me, if the map says no good, believe it. My name is Kalen. I don't usually start stories like that, but for this one, I think it matters. You don't tell certain things unless you're ready to admit they happened. This was 4 years ago. I was 28 and circling the drain. Burnout isn't just a buzzword. It's a fog that wraps around your ribs and tightens gradually, until you forget what normal even feels like. I couldn't think, couldn't sleep, Couldn't even sit still without feeling like I needed to chew through my own skin. Panic attacks came like clockwork, and my days were a blur of fluorescent lights, deadlines, and chewing antacids like candy. Eventually I cracked. Took unpaid leave from my job at the design firm in Volner City. Didn't even tell half my co-workers. Just packed a bag and ghosted. I needed quiet. Real quiet. Avon, a buddy of mine from college, said he knew a guy who had a cabin somewhere near Gravan Hollow, way out in the coastward hills bordering the Tharnack Woods. Said it belonged to his uncle, but the man hadn't used it in years. Claimed the place was stocked, functional, and best of all, totally off-grid. No Wi-Fi, no cell signal, not even power lines. You'll be alone, Avon said. Dead quiet. Might be good for you. I was desperate enough not to ask questions. I said yes within the hour. The drive out took nearly 5 hours. I left Volner before noon and arrived just after 4 p.m. The last 40 minutes were spent inching along a single-lane gravel road that twisted like a snake across the hills. I passed 2 mailboxes, a rusted-out trailer, and a wooden sign nailed to a tree that said, "Gravan Hollow, slow or stay lost." The cabin looked okay from the outside. Weathered wood, narrow chimney, moss crawling up one side like a green tide. It sat in a hollow, surrounded by trees so tall they seemed to lean in from every angle. No yard. Just forest, dense, unmoving, expectant. No phone signal. Not even a blip. But that was the idea. A man was already waiting on the porch when I pulled up. Thin, tall, skin pale and stretched like parchment over his bones. Hair coal black and hanging past his jaw like wet vines. He wore a long gray coat that looked like it had come from another century. His smile was the first thing that put me off. It was too wide and too quick, like he'd practiced it in a mirror. "You're Kalen?" he asked. His voice was soft but dry, like leaves scraping against a window. "Yeah," I said. "You must be?" "Rusk," he said. "Caretaker." He didn't offer a handshake, just nodded like someone confirming a package delivery. "You'll have the place to yourself. I live nearby. Holler if you need anything." Before I could ask what nearby meant, he turned and walked straight into the woods. No path, no vehicle. Just vanished between the trees like he'd been absorbed. The first night was fine. Almost pleasant, in fact. I unpacked, lit the fireplace, made some instant noodles, and sank into a battered armchair with a bourbon and an old paperback. The silence was heavy but not oppressive. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. The second night, things changed. It started with 3 soft knocks. Deliberate. Right after 10 p.m. I was in the kitchen, rinsing out my mug, when I heard it from the window above the sink. Knock. 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 I froze. Waited. Nothing else followed. I turned off the faucet, crept to the window, and peered out with my flashlight. Nothing. Just trees and darkness. Could have been a branch. Could have been. The third night, the knocks came again. This time from the window near the front door. Same pattern. 3 slow taps. Not rushed, not timid. Intentional. I didn't check right away. I stood in the middle of the cabin, flashlight in hand, heart hammering. The room felt too still, like something was holding its breath. Eventually I looked. Again, nothing. No footprints, no movement. Just the forest, crouched and silent. That same night, I saw Rusk. He was standing just inside the tree-line, far enough that his features were blurred but close enough that I knew it was him. He didn't move. Didn't speak. Just faced the cabin, arms at his sides like a marionette waiting for strings. I stepped outside and called his name. No answer. Then, like someone pressing rewind on a tape, he moved backward, perfectly straight, into the trees until he vanished. I barely slept that night. By morning I was done. I packed before breakfast. Decided I'd hike back to a proper road and hitch a ride if I had to. I'd had enough wilderness. I opened the door. Rusk was standing right outside, inches away. "You said you were leaving tomorrow," he said. His voice was wrong. Not just in tone, but texture. Like someone trying to mimic a voice they'd only ever heard through drywall. It was too smooth in places, too fractured in others. Uncanny. "I changed my mind," I said. Tried to keep my tone even. He smiled again. Wider this time. Too wide. His mouth opened, but there were no teeth. Just a black, wet space that didn't look like a throat. "There's nothing out there for you," he said. Then he turned and walked around the side of the cabin. I slammed the door and locked it. I tried calling Avon straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I sat for an hour, pacing, whispering to myself. Trying to make sense of it. Maybe Rusk was just insane. Maybe the isolation was messing with me. Then I heard it. From the back room. My voice. Calling my name. Not loud. Not aggressive. Calm. Slightly curious. But it was my voice. I didn't even pause. I grabbed my pack and bolted out the front door, down the slope, into the woods. No trail, no plan. Just downhill, hoping I'd hit a road. I ran until my legs gave out. Collapsed face first onto gravel. Turns out I was half a mile from a ranger station. I told them I'd gotten lost hiking. Didn't say anything else. Back in Volner, I confronted Avon. Asked him what kind of place he'd sent me to. He looked at me like I'd lost it. What cabin, he said. The one near Gravan Hollow, I said. Your friend's uncle's place? I don't have any friends with property out there, he said. I've never even heard of Gravan Hollow. I've always said I do my best thinking alone in the woods, but that's only true in daylight. Put me in a tent at midnight, 30 feet from the tree line, and my imagination turns into an unhinged screenwriter. Every snapping twig becomes a serial killer with a machete. Every gust of wind turns into the final breath of a ghost who never made it out. This was my first night at Sleeping Giant Provincial Park. I'd driven up from Thunder Bay that morning, sunroof open, feeling smug and self-sufficient in the way people do right before nature humbles their ass. I picked what I thought was the perfect spot, a little ridge tucked into the edge of the woods, overlooking a slope that rolled down into a pebble beach. The lake stretched out beyond that, dark and still, a mirror of the sky. The trees were dense behind me, but the beach gave just enough openness to make me feel like I wasn't completely boxed in. It was a solo trip, my first in a while. No friends, no cell reception, no backup. Just me, a tent that smelled like old nylon and regret, and a pack full of dehydrated meals and misplaced confidence. I set up camp, boiled some water, ate the saddest pouch of chili mac I've ever tasted, and tried to settle in for the night. Cue the brain squirrels. Lying there, staring at the crinkled ceiling of my tent, I could hear everything. Every creak of the trees, every rustle of dry leaves. And the loons. Jesus Christ, the loons. If you've never heard one at night, it's like listening to a haunted whistle being murdered by an opera ghost. Beautiful. Terrifying. Not ideal for sleep. I kept telling myself it was fine. That the woods were loud because they were alive. That the sounds were normal. That I wasn't going to be murdered by a feral drifter in a moose mask. But my brain was doing flips. What if someone had followed me out here? What if I'd parked where I wasn't supposed to, and some backwoods ranger was going to show up pissed off and unhinged? What if I'd accidentally set up camp on cursed land? What if I wasn't alone? That last one stuck. Because then I heard it. Crunch. A heavy step. Not wind. Not squirrels. Something big. Something with weight. Crunch. Snap. Another footfall, closer this time. Something shifting in the underbrush just beyond the tent. I stopped breathing. My heart tried to jackhammer its way out of my chest. My hands were cold and slick with sweat. I felt like a rabbit under glass, completely still but vibrating inside. Then came the sound that made my bowels consider an early release. Crash. A loud, rolling clatter of rocks. It echoed down the slope toward the beach, followed by a series of loud thuds. Like something had slipped, stumbled, and face-planted into the lake's edge. I didn't move at first. Just lay there wide-eyed, trying to convince myself it was a dream. But the adrenaline had other plans. My fingertips were tingling, and my tongue felt glued to the roof of my mouth. Then something in me, not bravery, not logic, maybe just morbid curiosity, decided I needed to see what the hell had just crash-landed outside my tent. So I grabbed my flashlight, clicked it on, narrow beam, weak as hell, and slowly unzipped the tent door. I peeked out. Nothing at first. Just the slope, the beach, the shadow of the trees. Then I caught movement to the left. Big. Lumbering. Antlers. An elk. A massive, dumb, majestic elk had apparently misjudged its footing and taken a tumble down the hill. It now stood awkwardly at the bottom of the slope, snorting and shaking like it was trying to pretend the fall hadn't happened. I blinked. It blinked. We stared at each other like two drunk strangers in a gas station at 2 a.m., both wondering who was going to make the first move. "You good?" I whispered like that would help. It made a low, gurgling noise, turned its head, and trotted off along the beach like it had somewhere important to be. Dignity trailing behind it like toilet paper on a shoe. I zipped the tent back up and sat there for a long time, flashlight still on, chest slowly unclenching. I didn't die. Didn't get murdered by a forest cult. Didn't get dragged off by a wendigo. Didn't even get pantsed by a moose. Just a clumsy elk. That's all. But here's the thing. When I finally lay back down, heart rate easing, something caught my attention outside the tent. A sound I hadn't noticed before. Breathing. Not mine. Not the elk. Something slow. Rhythmic. Too close. I turned off the flashlight. Held my breath. Listened. And it stopped. Total silence. Then from farther up the slope, a different sound. A whisper. Not words. Just the shape of them. Like someone trying to remember how to speak. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of elk. But because I wasn't sure I was still alone. My name's Run. That probably doesn't matter to you, but I need to say it. You don't tell stories like this unless you're ready to put your name on them. I was 20 when I decided to hike part of the Red Knife Ridge Trail alone. Not the whole thing, just a week through the Kavaska Range in western Duskwater Province. I wasn't chasing enlightenment or trying to find myself. I just needed to not be home. Back home, everything was collapsing in slow motion. My parents had stopped pretending they liked each other. My ex had ghosted me after 3 years with a text that just said, "I can't anymore." In college, it felt like I was sprinting on a treadmill with no off switch. So I bought a cheap bus ticket to Duskwater, packed a bag with gear I didn't know how to use properly, and told my parents I'd check in when I reached the next town. Then I shut off my phone and walked into the woods like I was disappearing on purpose. The trail was beautiful. For the first 2 days, it gave me what I'd come for: quiet, clarity, and just enough physical exhaustion to keep my brain from spiraling. I boiled pasta over a tiny burner, scribbled in a notebook I barely filled, and actually started sleeping through the night. I thought I was healing. Then came day 3. I'd camped beside a shallow creek, good water access, soft moss underfoot, no bugs for once. I'd just finished dinner, sitting by the fire and staring at nothing when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow even. Crunching pine needles like they didn't care who heard them. I looked up. He stepped out of the trees like he'd always been there. Tall. Thin. Late 30s maybe. Beard the color of rust. His clothes were a patchwork of camo and torn denim, and his boots looked like they'd been through a war. Strapped to his hip was a long knife, the sheath held together with duct tape and a leather belt. He smiled like we were friends. I nodded. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. My fingers drifted closer to my multi-tool. "You camping solo?" he asked. His voice was low, gravelly, easy to like, but his eyes didn't match it. They were flat. Not dead, just unreadable. I lied. "Tent's mine. My buddies camped just up the ridge. We're checking out different sites." He gave a slow nod like he was filing the lie away. "Mind if I pitch nearby?" he asked. "Won't bother you." It felt like a trap. Every instinct screamed, say no. But saying no didn't feel like an option. Like something bad would happen right away if I did. "Sure," I said. "Public land." He unrolled a blanket. Just a blanket. No food. No pack. No sleeping bag. Just a rusted canteen and that knife. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. Who hikes into the wilderness with nothing but a bedroll and a blade? That night, I zipped into my tent early and didn't sleep. Outside, he sat by the fire, silent, watching the flames die out, muttering to himself now and then. Not words I could make out, just a low, steady rhythm. At some point, he lay down, but I could still hear his breathing. Long, slow, controlled. I dozed in fits, waking at every cracked twig or brush of wind. By dawn, I was already packed. He was squatting by the creek, staring into his reflection like it was whispering secrets. "You moving on?" he asked without turning. "Yeah," I said. "Trying to cover some miles today." "You sure you don't want company?" I forced a chuckle. I usually hike better alone. He stood and faced me. His smile was thinner this time. "A lot of folks go missing out here." I didn't respond. I just walked. Fast. All day, I hiked like something was behind me. I didn't stop for water or rest. My eyes kept darting to the tree-line, waiting for him to step out again. He didn't. Not that day. But that night, I woke to the smell of something dead. Sweet. Wet. Rotting. I unzipped the tent and gagged. Right outside was a squirrel. Split open neatly, its tiny organs gone. Eyes wide, limbs stretched like it had been arranged. I buried it under a pile of rocks and left without eating. I didn't stop. Not for anything. I just walked. Late that afternoon, my legs finally gave out, and I stumbled into a half-rotted lean-to carved with names and old dates. It didn't feel safe, but I was out of options. I unrolled my sleeping bag inside, kept my knife close, and tried to rest. I don't know how long I was asleep before the woods went silent. No bugs. No wind. Just this heavy, awful stillness. Then footsteps. Soft at first. Then louder. Then the dragging. Something heavy sliding through leaves. And then his voice. Thought I might catch up with you. I grabbed my knife and flashlight, hard in my throat. He stepped into the clearing like he'd been waiting for this moment all day. Same clothes. Same duct-taped knife. Same dead-eyed smile. You sleeping yet? He asked like it was a joke. I didn't answer. He took a step closer. Not fast. Methodical. You left awful quick, he said. Didn't even say goodbye. He didn't come closer than the edge of the lean-to. Just stood there, swinging that knife lazily at his side. Some folks, he muttered, don't know how to be grateful. Then he turned and walked back into the woods. No chase. No scream. Just gone. I didn't sleep. Just sat with my back against the wall, knife in hand, flashlight burning a hole in the dark. When the sun came up, I checked behind me, and my stomach dropped. Carved into the wood, right above where my head had rested, were the words. Still watching you. I ran. Didn't stop until I hit a road and flagged down a trucker who looked at me like I'd crawled out of a grave. You okay, kid? He asked. I told him I'd had a rough night. That was 5 years ago. I never went back. I never told my parents. Never filed a report. Never contacted the trail office. What would I even say? Sometimes I dream about it. Not the man. Not the knife. But the look in his eyes. Like he was waiting for me to become something else. Like he knew that I would. And sometimes, when I'm walking alone or flipping through old gear, I find things I don't remember packing. A feather stuck in my boot tread. A stone in the bottom of my bag. A strip of duct tape, curled and dusty. Little things. Like reminders. Like he's still watching. I've never written anything like this before, but I can't stop thinking about it. Maybe writing it down will help. Believe me or don't, I'm not sure I even believe it myself. But something followed us in the woods last weekend. And whatever it wasn't human. It wasn't an animal either. I'm a senior at pre-med, attending school in Raleigh. I grew up in western North Carolina, about 40 minutes from the Tennessee border. My parents still live in a small house tucked off a gravel road about 15 minutes from the Appalachian Trail. We're used to isolation, spotty power, no internet unless you park near the library. No neighbors for miles. It's the kind of place people romanticize until the sun goes down. Between school, labs, and burnout, I hadn't been home in months. When I finally caught a break, I jumped on it. My girlfriend, Emily, was free that weekend too, so I invited her for a short backpacking trip. She's from Charlotte, city girl, never hung a bare bag, never checked herself for ticks. But she's adventurous and had always wanted to see the real woods. I told her I'd take her on a 2-day hike through a forgotten loop that branches off the Appalachian Trail, through an area my grandfather always warned me about, Walker's Hollow. She thought the name sounded spooky. I thought it would make the trip memorable. We parked at a barely marked pull-off Friday afternoon. One other car was there, an older model, dusty windows, no people in sight. I double-checked the topo map, shouldered my pack, and we headed in. The trail was overgrown, like it hadn't seen maintenance in years. Oak and poplar trees pressed close from either side. Rhododendron arched over the path like green tunnels. The further we hiked, the quieter it got. Not peaceful, more like the forest was listening. I didn't mention that to Emily. No need to freak her out. We passed a few odd markers nailed to trees. Faded planks with chalky symbols. One had a triangle with a circle in the center, scratched out with a knife. I told myself it was just some old forestry sign. About 5 miles in, we reached a decent campsite near a creek. There was a collapsed fire ring, soggy with leaves. I cleaned it out while Emily unpacked. We got a small fire going before dusk. Dinner was basic, dehydrated chili mac and lukewarm granola bars, but the air smelled like wood smoke and wet leaves. For a little while, it felt good to be out there disconnected. Emily said the woods were quieter than she expected. She asked if there were coyotes out here. I laughed and decided to show off a little. I used to mimic coyote howls when I was a kid. So I stood up, cupped my hands, and let out a long, shrill howl across the creek bed. She rolled her eyes. That was loud as hell. Wait for it, I grinned. We stood there listening. Nothing but the creek and wind in the trees. I tried again, adding some yips at the end. Still nothing. Maybe they're curled up somewhere, I said. Then it came. A sound echoed back, not a coyote. It started low, like a whistle twisted in the wind, then climbed into this screech that stretched too long. It didn't breathe. It just kept going. It came from up the ridge behind us. Emily stiffened. What the hell was that? I froze. Bobcat maybe? But I knew better. I've heard bobcats. This was sharper, like metal tearing. Like a scream that didn't know how to stop. She moved closer to the fire. That wasn't a bobcat. I didn't answer. Just scanned the trees. Fog had started to roll in, thicker between the trunks. The heat from the fire felt fake almost. Like it wasn't reaching my skin. We doused the flames, zipped into the tent, and lay there listening. I kept my headlamp and my knife within reach. Emily eventually drifted off. I didn't. I kept hearing something, movement just past the treeline. Something that clicked when it walked. Something that paused whenever I held my breath. And sometime after midnight, I saw them. Two pale eyes just beyond the trees. They didn't glow. They reflected. I must have passed out eventually. I woke just before dawn with my mouth dry and sore, like I'd been grinding my teeth all night. Emily twitched in her sleep, legs jerking beneath the sleeping bag like she was running in her dream. Then I heard it again, the clicking. Slower this time. Hooves on wood or stone. It was circling us. I didn't look. I didn't breathe. I just lay there frozen. Then I heard a voice. Hey, come out here. Emily's voice. Her exact tone. But she was still asleep beside me. I watched her chest rise and fall. The voice repeated it. Come out here. Then silence. No wind. No birds. Not even the creek. When Emily woke up later, she said she had the worst dream of her life. She said she saw me in the forest, shirtless, chest covered in blood, telling her to follow me. We didn't talk. Just packed in silence. No breakfast. We knew we had to leave. But the trail felt wrong. Familiar places were missing. A footbridge was gone. We saw stone cairns beside the trail, dozens of them. Some had small bones in the center. Then we saw the tree. A dead poplar about 50 yards off trail. Nailed to it was an iron horseshoe. Hanging from it, a deer's skull. The bone was carved with spirals and claw marks. Emily wanted to turn back. I insisted we keep going. The fog got thicker. We passed the same tree, one with a split trunk and a slash of orange lichen, 3 times. Something was circling us, or leading us. We finally found the old trail shelter. Roof caving in, moss on the walls, raccoon scat in the corner. But it was shelter, a place to breathe. We ate protein bars with shaking hands. I told Emily to rest while I checked the area. I was looking for tracks, signs, anything, nothing. When I got back, I must have drifted off. I woke to Emily screaming. She stood outside, pointing at the ground. No, no, what is that? At her feet was a perfect ring of stones. Inside it, her boot. One of the ones she was wearing the night before. It was clean, dry, the laces tied. She had both boots on. I've never seen her cry like that. How did it get that? How did it know? We didn't stay. We packed and left without looking back. But the woods weren't done with us. Figures moved between the trees. Thin, upright, too fast. Always just out of sight. The fog choked the trail. Daylight never really came. Just this gray half-light that never changed. We didn't talk. We just walked. And then there it was. The clearing. Bones and spirals. Some human. And then clicking. All around us. Then the shriek. Close. No echo. Just raw noise that hit like a wave. We ran. I grabbed Emily's hand, and we ran until the trees thinned, and we reached the overlook. Below us, the real trail. The parking lot. We didn't stop. We slid down the ridge, half falling. At the last switchback, I looked back. It stood at the treeline. Tall. Gaunt. Legs bent backward. Hooves in the dirt. Its chest rose like it was breathing. Its face twisted into a snarl as it looked at me. Clouded eyes locked with mine. Then it spoke in my voice. Don't leave me. Emily heard it too. She squeezed my hand. Then more of them stepped out. Identical but wrong. One with a broken jaw. One with crooked antlers. All of them watching. We didn't stop until we hit Asheville. Emily dropped the class we shared. She doesn't answer my texts. I tried to report it. The ranger said that area had been closed for years. No maintained shelters. No campsites. I asked if he'd heard of Walker's Hollow. He paused. Said that name hadn't been used in decades. I'm not the kind of person who spooks easily. I've hiked solo in bear country, camped through lightning storms, even gotten lost once in Pisgah, and managed to find my way out with half a map and a granola bar. But what happened in 2021 on the Appalachian Trail still keeps me up some nights. And no matter how many times I try to logic my way through it, I can't explain it. Not all of it. There were 5 of us, me, Nate, Serena, Tyler, and Chris. All experienced hikers, nothing casual. We'd planned a 10-day section hike, aiming to avoid the crowds and the bugs by going early October. No GPS, just maps, compasses, and the thrill of going old school. We were 3 days in when the fog rolled in. We'd made camp on a flat shelf just off the trail after a night of light rain. We expected mist, sure, but not this. The fog didn't move. It didn't lift. It just sat there, thick and silent, like it had weight. I couldn't see more than 15 feet. No wind, no birds, no insects. Even when I called out to Nate, who was just 10 feet away, the sound was muffled, like we were speaking through insulation. He was hunched over the fire pit, trying to coax a flame from damp twigs. Serena stood at the edge of camp, staring into the trees like she expected something to emerge. We all pretended to be cool about it. Fog happens, right? Then we heard it. Laughter. High-pitched, unmistakably children. At first, just a single giggle. Then a few more, like a group playing tag just beyond the fog wall. We froze. We were miles from any road. There shouldn't have been anyone else out here, let alone kids. Chris muttered, "Maybe a scout troop?" Tyler shrugged, but even he looked uneasy. Weird, but not impossible. Then they appeared. 8 children, pale, silent, walking in a single file line straight through our camp. Their clothes were old, muted grays and browns, buttoned tight to the throat. No bags. No gear. No mud on their shoes. They didn't glance at us. Just passed by like we weren't there. Serena reached for my hand and held on tight. Her palm was damp, but her grip didn't shake. One girl stopped. She turned to us, head tilted at a strange angle, too far, like her neck didn't understand limits. "Where are you going?" she asked. Nate, ever the sarcastic one, replied, "North." "Through hiking the at." The girl blinked. Her lips twitched, like she was trying to smile but couldn't quite remember how. "This isn't the Appalachian Trail," she said, then turned and kept walking. The others followed. At the rear, a tall figure, hooded, face completely hidden, brought up the line. Then they vanished into the fog. We didn't speak for a long while. Eventually, Chris said, "Okay, that was messed up." Serena wanted to go back south. Nate insisted we keep moving. We voted. 3-2, we pushed ahead. We hadn't gone a mile before things got worse. First, it was the trees. White stick figures scratched into the bark. Not blazes, these were crude. One tree had a spiral carved deep into the trunk. Another had tally marks, 8 vertical lines, 1 long slash through them. Then we saw the dates. Carved in a line down one tree, 1941, 1951, 1961, all the way up to 2021. Our year. That hit me hard. We didn't talk much after that. The air got heavier. The fog wouldn't lift. It clung to us, made every breath feel like sipping through wet cotton. And behind us, always behind us, we kept hearing that laughter. Never ahead. Always following. By late afternoon, we were completely disoriented. No new blazes. No junctions. Just this endless tunnel of mist and silence. Our compasses started to disagree with each other. Chris said maybe it was iron in the rocks, but even he didn't sound convinced. Then we heard the laughter again. Closer now. Sharper. Less playful. It would echo from the left, then the right, then dead ahead. Then we saw the spiral. Scratched into a tree ahead. Jagged, uneven, like someone had gouged it with a knife. Inside the spiral, 8 small stick figures. Nate stepped closer, then pulled back fast. They're all missing eyes. We needed to stop. Serena was shaking. We found a small hollow near a rock wall and set up camp. We agreed to keep watch in pairs. I took second watch with Chris. Around 1 a.m., we realized Josh wasn't in his tent. Zipped shut. Empty. No footprints. No gear missing. We called quietly at first. Then louder. No answer. Then we saw him. Standing in a clearing, surrounded by 8 tiny piles of stones. Each stack identical. 3 stones on the bottom, 1 flat stone on top. He didn't move. His eyes were open but vacant. When I called his name, he finally spoke. They showed me the real path. That's all he said. Then all our headlamps cut out. No flicker. Just dead. Fog swallowed everything. I swear I heard something breathe nearby. Not human. Not animal. Something deeper. Branches snapped around us. Chris grabbed Josh and we dragged him back, half stumbling. Nate was by the fire pit, holding a flare he hadn't lit. We zipped into the tent, weapons out. No one slept. When morning came, I unzipped the door. We were back in that same clearing. Same stone piles, but now one of them had a child's shoe on top. Rotting. Small. Laces still tied. Serena lost it. She sat down and started crying, whispering that we had to leave immediately. Nate suggested retracing our steps. We all knew that was impossible. Josh didn't say another word. He just followed us, blank-faced. We moved fast. No food. No breaks. Phones dead. Fog clinging tighter than ever. Then we saw it, a lean-to, half-collapsed. We thought it might be a ranger outpost. Inside, drawings, dozens of them, nailed to the walls. Crayon. Charcoal. Blood-colored paint. Stick figures walking into spirals. In one drawing, 5 were red. The rest were black. A Polaroid was tacked to the back wall. Us. On Springer Mountain. Same gear. Same clothes. None of us remembered anyone taking that photo. I felt sick. The kind of sick that starts in your chest and makes your whole body want to run. Then we heard metal scraping stone. Outside. We hid behind crates. Through the cracks, we saw them. The 8 children. Still. Silent. Humming. Behind them, the tall figure stepped forward. He unrolled a giant map. Our route. But changed. New symbols. Spirals. Loops, slashes. The trail didn't lead north anymore. It led back to the clearing. At the center of the spiral, one word. Return. Josh stepped forward like he wanted to go to them. Serena yanked him back. Chris flicked his lighter. That tiny flame felt like a lifeline. We ran. Branches tore at our arms. Fog swallowed our footprints. But eventually the air thinned. Birdsong returned. And then gravel. A fire road. 5 minutes later, a Forest Service truck rolled around the bend. The ranger saw our condition, bloody, filthy, no packs, but didn't ask many questions. Just drove us to the station near Hot Springs. We said we got lost and lost our gear. That's all we said. No one mentioned the kids, or the map, or the voice that called to us like it knew our names already. A few days later, I went digging through online archives. Found 8 missing child cases from that same stretch of trail. Over the last 40 years. All unsolved. Ages 6 to 12. I also checked the lean-to. No record of it. Not on any map. Rangers said it didn't exist. Josh still won't talk. He barely talks at all anymore. The rest of us, we don't hike together anymore. But sometimes, when I can't sleep, I hear that girl's voice in my head. This isn't the Appalachian Trail. She was right. The Wolf Creek trailhead sign caught the first blush of sunrise, and something in my chest twitched. Someone had hammered a splintered warning board across the kiosk. Keep quiet after dark. Then half ripped it away, like they changed their mind mid-warning. I pried it loose and slipped it into my pack. Told Brooke I wanted it as a souvenir. The truth? I didn't like leaving omens behind me. The air smelled like wet pine and cold stone. Fog lay thick on the switchbacks, every breath bouncing against our cheeks. We hiked in silence. The chill reached through my shirt, all the way down to my spine. The deeper we went, the more the trees leaned in, like they were listening. Just past the first saddle, the fog thinned. The trail reappeared beneath us like a spine of dark earth. That's when I noticed the tracks. One set of boot prints. Size 13 at least. Deep. Alone. They ran for maybe 50 yards, then veered left, straight into the brush. No rocks. No trail junction. Just vanished. The ground beyond looked untouched. No broken twigs. No scuffed leaves. Like whoever it was disappeared clean. By early afternoon, the fog split open enough to show the trail ahead. We stopped at an unnamed seep, a trickle of water leaking from mossy limestone. Brooke knelt to fill the filter bag, then froze. Logan, look. Beneath the surface, a lattice of twigs had been wedged into place. Each stick stripped of bark, sharpened at both ends. Like a crude trap, they reeked of something sweet and spoiled, fermented berries, wet mulch. I lifted one with my knife. The bark sloughed off like skin, revealing wood riddled with pinholes. I dropped it fast. My mouth tasted like copper. We camped a few hundred yards uphill on a narrow shelf barely wide enough for the 2-person tent. I tried to play it light. Bare bags 30 yards that way. Exits here. No problem. Brooke nodded, but I could feel her pulse racing when she squeezed my hand. After dark, the fog came back thicker. Moonlight flickered like bad electricity. Sometime after 2 a.m., I woke to a sound that didn't belong. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. Footsteps. Deliberate. Measured. Circling. Brooke's eyes were already open. I slid the lamp strap around my wrist and unzipped the tent halfway. The light pierced maybe 20 feet. Then the fog swallowed everything. But there, crouched among the laurels, 3 figures. Scarecrow thin. Limbs wrapped in what looked like burlap and moss. Their heads turned in unison, no bob, no sway. Just a flat, mechanical pivot toward me. No eyes. Just blank sockets like river stones. I stepped forward. Some instinct said to drive them off. "Hey!" My voice cracked. One figure rose, nearly 7 feet tall. It raised 2 dead branches. Click. Click. The sticks met once. Then again. Perfectly mimicking Brooke's laugh from earlier that night. That sweet, high laugh she always gives when she's trying not to be scared. My skin crawled. I shouted again. "Leave." The beam shook in my hand. The figures scattered, not running, not stumbling. Just melting into the slope. Silence fell so hard I could hear my own heartbeat. The creak we'd listened to all night? Gone. Back in the tent, Brooke leaned into me. Neither of us slept. When dawn smeared across the sky, I stepped out. The ground around the tent was pocked with prints. Bare. Narrow. 6 toes. Claw-tipped. They formed a perfect circle around us. Toes pointed inward, like they'd stood there all night. Watching. Brooke said nothing. Just started breaking down the tent. We didn't eat. Didn't talk. Just hiked. The fog stretched thinner, but never lifted. My watch ticked forward, then back. We'd burned 20 miles of trail, but it felt like the same mile on repeat. Birdsong stayed high in the canopy. None of them dared come low. The air started to smell like metal. Wet pennies in sunlight. Along a mossy cliff, we found pine trunks skinned of bark. The raw wood beneath had been carved into human shapes. Nailed head high. All of them facing the cliff, not the trail. Rust streaked down from each nail. I touched one. My fingers came away clean. The red was in the grain. Brooke's breath trembled. I wrapped an arm around her and pulled her close. "We'll be out by dusk," I lied. By late afternoon, we found a ledge barely big enough to shelter. One way in. Cliff at our backs. We pitched the tent fast. Rainfly low. I loaded both pistols. Brooke strung a line across the entrance, tied it to her titanium stakes, and dangled my mug from the middle so it would ring if touched. We lay together in the dark, not speaking. Just listening. Then tink. The mug shivered. Something was outside. Breathing. Slow. Heavy. Then a voice. Just inches from the nylon. "Why'd you bring the gun?" My voice. My exact cadence. Then again, but this time Brooke's voice. Fragile. Cracking. She clamped a hand over her mouth. I whispered, "We're armed. Step away now." The forest exhaled. Everything, crickets, wind, frogs, fell silent. Then footsteps. 2 paces. Pause. 2 paces. Pause. Retreating. But not leaving. We lay still until dawn. When I stepped out, the paracord was gone. The stake still in place. My mug was on its side, wrapped in a braided loop, made from our bootlaces. Both pairs had been cut while we slept. The laces woven into a perfect hangman's noose. A gray fingerprint streaked the tent zipper. It glittered faintly like powdered bone. Brooke stared, then turned and vomited. We didn't speak. Just broke camp in 6 minutes flat. No coffee. No filter stop. As we climbed the next ridge, I saw it. A figure. Thin. Shoulders draped in something wet and fluttering. Its head tilted like a curious dog. Then it raised one long arm and pointed. Downhill. The way we were already going. Brooke whispered, "It's hurting us." I didn't argue. We turned left onto a faint connector trail and ran. Minutes later, a soft beep echoed behind us. Then another. I found it wedged in a tree knot, a Bluetooth speaker. Red light blinking. It played our footfalls. 3 seconds behind. Then a whistle. Too deep to be human. Like an elk bugle dropped an octave. Birds burst from the trees. Some dropped dead. We fled into a drainage filled with leaves. Halfway down, Brooke's foot vanished. A sinkhole. I grabbed her pack and pulled. Below us, bones. Deer. Bear. Human. A pair of front teeth sat atop a flat rock. Still pink at the roots. Up above, the forest began to chant. Coordinates. Figures ringed the rim. Pale. Crouched. Rocking. Then lightning. They stood. Arms wide. capes of bark snapping like sails. A slab of stone tilted into the hole. A ramp. Go! I shoved Brooke up first. Something pursued. Bare feet slapping in a counter rhythm. We exploded out of the sinkhole and bolted. Branches whipped our faces. Fog thickened again. Then it thinned. A service road. A truck. Hunter's rig, tailgate down. He aimed a shotgun but didn't fire. Just stared. We collapsed beside his bumper. Forest Ranger Hal Teague arrived 10 minutes later. I told him everything. He didn't blink. You crossed Dead Oaks Hollow, he said. Locals call them Ridge Watchers. They don't like noise. 3 weeks later, back home in Roanoke, a padded envelope arrived. No return address. Inside, the ripped warning board from the trailhead. And a micro SD card. Labeled 2:03 a.m. I played it. My voice whispered, "Why'd you bring the gun?" 13 times. Each time followed by a wet exhale that fogged the mic. At the end, click, click. Brooke's laugh. Perfectly imitated. The trail register at Massey Gap felt colder than the wind. The metal box was frosted, beaded with a glaze so fine it looked like powdered glass. I signed my name, Caleb Foster, Asheville, North Carolina. Then scribbled a note for my fiancée. 7 days of peace. 10 miles a day. Back with a clear head and better stories. I shut the lid. The clang echoed through the high meadows where wild ponies pawed at brittle grass. Their breath fogged into the early light like smoke from a dying fire. If there was a better place to clear my thoughts after another argument with Leah, I hadn't found it. For the first 2 miles, it felt like the world had been reset. A chestnut pony trotted behind me, close enough I could brush its mane. The bald summit of Wilburn Ridge shimmered under the rising sun. Somewhere to the east, a woodpecker hammered out a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. I inhaled deeply. The air carried the sharp scent of pine, and something else. Smoke. Just a thread of it, faint and sweet, like cedar being burned too slow. I told myself a hunter down in the valley might be clearing brush, and kept moving. By late afternoon, I reached a saddle below Buzzard Rock and set up camp beneath a crown of hemlocks. While the jet boil hissed, I filmed a quick GoPro diary for Leah. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Day 1. Easy miles. Strange smell of smoke all day. Probably nothing. Missing you already. The stove ticked off. Silence crept back in. Somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard a soft crackle. Like fire coaxed back from the brink. Later that night, I woke cold. Breath fogging in the tent. Then I heard it. A soft scrape. The side of the tent flexed inward, like someone or something was brushing against it. I froze. Another snap. Sap boiling in wood. I unzipped the vestibule and shoved my headlamp out into the trees. Just fog. But 20 yards away, a faint orange glow hovered. Brightening. Fading. Brightening again. An ember? It blinked out the moment I tried to focus on it. I zipped up and lay there, awake and sweating despite the cold. When dawn came, something was wrong. My rainfly, forest green yesterday, now bore a black smear down the middle. Like a soot-streaked hand had dragged itself from the apex to the stake loop. When I touched it, my finger came away covered in ash. And the tent fabric? Not even singed. I packed up, unsettled but trying to stay rational. The trail climbed toward Mount Rogers. At each switchback, the smell of smoke grew stronger. It wasn't just wood anymore. It had a sour note, like burnt hair. Then I saw them. Hoof prints. Not pony tracks. These were scorched into the soil. Perfect outlines, the edges crisp. Steam still rising from one. The herd grazed nearby. None looked hurt. Still, I felt watched. That night, I pitched camp beneath 2 leaning hemlocks. A sheltered spot. I tried to sleep, but the smell was worse now, layers of smoke, sap, and something else. Something that made my stomach twist. In the dark, a shape loomed outside the tent. Kneeling. Shoulders hunched. Head tilted like it was listening to my heartbeat. I unzipped the vestibule with my knife in one hand, light in the other. Gone. But on the ground, a neat pile of cedar shavings, arranged into an arrow, pointing south, toward deeper forest. The tips of the shavings glowed faintly. No flame, just heat. I scattered them with my boot. I didn't sleep. By morning, the air inside the tent was warm enough to sweat. My journal pages had curled. The ink had run, like the heat had baked into the paper. And my thermometer? 42 degrees. But the trees were bleeding sap. The ground hissed where it dripped. I told myself it was just a trick of the weather. I kept moving. Then I hit the fallen hemlock. It was huge, torn from the earth like a god had yanked it free. No way around. I checked the map. A faint dotted line, Devil's Ladder. A connector trail, steeper but shorter. I took it. Almost immediately, the air changed. Thick. Wet. The kind of heat that clings to your skin and gets under your clothes. My watch still said 45 degrees, but I was drenched in sweat. The forest shimmered like a mirage. Then I saw him. Blackened skin. Shoulders hunched. Facing away. Clothes melted to his body. Smoke curling from his scalp. His skin cracked and glowed like coals under ash. He turned. Eyes like embers. I couldn't scream. My throat closed. The air tasted like scorched metal. He stepped forward. Every branch he touched flared, then faded. No fire. Just white needles. He raised a hand. Sparks danced from his fingers, but didn't fall. Didn't burn the ground. Just for him. I stumbled backward, boots skidding. His head tilted, skin cracking louder. Then he flickered, like heat waves distorting an image. My GoPro beeped, even though it was off. Static lines filled the screen. My nostrils filled with the smell of burning plastic. I ran. Branches tore at my arms. The trail was steep, but I didn't care. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Crunch. Crunch. No rush. Just patience. Night fell. I found a hollow littered with dead hemlocks. No way to backtrack. I set up camp on a scrap of flat earth, barely wide enough to stretch out. The forest breathed around me. Each breath was heat. Not wind, breath. I lay there, knife in hand. Then the footsteps returned. Circling. Then a whisper. My name. Drawn out like a sigh through teeth. And then, a thump. Something landed outside the tent. I unzipped the door. A child's sneaker. Burned. Canvas melted. Sole warped. Inside the blackened rubber, numbers bubbled through the soot. An ember flickered in the toe, then died. I didn't sleep. I ran the next morning. I don't even remember packing. Just running. And there, far ahead, an old farmhouse burned to the bones. Chimney still smoking. A sheriff's cruiser idled nearby. A woman in uniform leaned out. You all right? Her badge read Riddle. I climbed in, hands shaking. She didn't ask much. Just drove me to a stock trough filled with rainwater. We stopped. The hood of the cruiser hissed as I leaned on it. House caught fire 4 nights ago, she said. Family inside. No gas leak. No arson. Just combustion. I told her everything. The ember eyes. The soot-streaked tent. The shoe. She nodded. I was 12 in '86. 3 hikers burned inside a cabin that winter. Only thing left were footprints scorched into the floor. She looked past me, and her voice dropped. It's back. I turned. It stood at the edge of the field. Taller now. Glowing brighter. The grass beneath its feet curled into ash. Sheriff Riddle grabbed a fire blanket, threw it. It struck the thing, and for a moment the flames dimmed. I dumped a barrel of water across the path. Steam exploded upward, hiding everything. When it cleared, the figure was gone. Only a black silhouette scorched into the gravel. No body. Just a stain that swallowed light. We drove in silence. At the ranger station, they wrapped my hands in gauze. Blisters rose where the thing had touched the tent. Perfect ovals. Later, I saw where I'd leaned on the cruiser. 2 handprints. Black. Still smoking. Nothing they did could wash them off. Riddle looked at me through the glass, and I saw it in her face. This thing wasn't gone. Just waiting. Up on the ridge, a new spot flare was already forming. The radio crackled. Control, we've got heat signatures above Buzzard Rock. I felt warmth rise beneath my skin, traveling from my chest to my jaw. 7 days, I'd promised Leah. 10 miles a day.